So a leasing strategy is really important when you're thinking about how it impacts and can support your business goals. So the first thing to consider when you're thinking about a leasing strategy is really the needs of your business. So is this a business that needs access for deliveries? Do you need 24/7 deliveries? Do you have that ability to get in and out of your unit at will and without additional costs, right? So thinking about the components there of A, what do I need this space for? B, how much space do I need? And how do we ultimately replicate that over time? And so really understanding the goals and uses of space is most important when you're starting to funnel into what is that overall strategy, so that when we go out and look for new space, that's dialed in and we can quickly eliminate ones that aren't going to support our needs. I think the worst thing you can do is go in without a strategy and start to play the trade-off game. So now we don't really need that, or that'd be nice, but I don't know if we need it. Those kinds of waffling and indecision will prevent you from making any decision. And so don't get into the trade-off game of what do we truly need in this space. And I think that's the first and foremost, is looking at what do we need and evaluating off of the needs of the business. And that's everything from, if we are getting deliveries, do we have access to a forklift? If we need to get a delivery at night, can they get in? Can I run a meeting here? Can I invite customers or vendors here? All of those things, that how will you operate in that space is really, really important to get nailed down first. So building out the why I'm leasing and what do I need is number one, because number two is probably getting into the pricing, right? And first, let's make sure that the space that we're going after is the right space, and then we can either negotiate on price or evaluate that second, but you may be willing to trade off on paying a little bit more because it is the right space to execute. You don't want to trade off on, it might not be the right space, and so now I am actually going to stymie my growth. I'm not going to be able to grow, or I'm not going to be able to do this, get this delivery, so we have to have workarounds for it. Don't get in that trade-off game. Nail that down first. And then second is the price, obviously. So when you're comparing that, really understanding, what's our all-in cost, and that might be looking back at existing sites and what that costs you. What are our utilities? What are the property taxes? What are all of the additional maintenance fees? And looking at that on an annual basis to say our monthly breakdown is actually X. And so now when I go in and compare, now I can assess, okay, triple net looks like this. It's probably also going to be this additional amount, and I have a better picture of that. Or, okay, this gross lease is a little bit higher than maybe my flat rate, triple net lease, but I'm getting all these additional amenities that actually cost me way more in one of my other locations. So understanding those financial dynamics of the lease and ultimately what you're willing to pay to have access to certain things is a huge aspect in really determining what are the valuable pieces of the financial equation. So first, what do I need? Second, what am I willing to pay? And then third, how am I going to go out and achieve the goals that I have? And so is that being closer to my customers and having smaller footprints, and ultimately being able to pop up new locations all over the place? Or is it we want to be really consolidated, we want to operate in a single area, we want to have everyone together? So understanding those factors of what do I need and how am I going to achieve these goals is a key component of the broader leasing strategy. Where am I going next? How do I go access that? All of those things are really important. Lastly is understanding the drain on the team that's on site depending on the type of facility that you're leasing at. So is somebody going to need to be that front of house property manager, so to speak, on a day-to-day basis to receive things, to take care of problems, to take care of issues, because that might be additional headcount, which may be an unforeseen cost because you're general manager of that site is not able to complete all these tasks, so he's losing out on business, right? So understanding what does a new space mean in terms of headcount and the people that you need to work with is really, really important. And then finally, what are those growth goals? So as we've talked about before, don't get locked into something as you are creating that leasing strategy. If you know that you might need to grow or you might need to expand, make sure you have that flexibility and that you're looking at those types of sites to make sure that you have what you need, both short-term and long-term, to really round out that overall leasing strategy. So flexible leasing is, a broad term, and so there's a lot of ways to interpret flexibility. And so I think the way that we think about flexibility is, do I have the ability to either look at short-term leases, so I'm not being locked into long-term, so I have that flexibility to get out of a lease, to expand in a lease, and not knowing what the future holds, I have that ability to make decisions as the pace of my business grows or slows. So that's one aspect of flexibility, is the lease term itself. So understanding that piece, looking at 12-month leases, 24-month leases, gives you much more control over what happens next, as opposed to guessing what the next 5 years, 10 years might hold. So that's one key part of flexible leasing, is the term itself. The second part of flexibility is, can I add on or expand at will? So if I'm mid-lease and I need more space, do I have to break my lease? Do I have to get out of my lease? Can I easily add on space? Can I upgrade into space? And so when you're thinking about that flexibility, really understanding your options, because if I start small and maybe one job comes along, so I have this real big opportunity to build a new house if I'm a construction person, or I have a big order from a customer and I need to take all that inventory on and hold it for a period of time. Do I have the ability to add on some additional space at a shorter term that allows me to execute on that opportunity but not be locked into that space for the long term? So that's one aspect of being able to take on opportunities as they come up without being locked in for an initial 5 years, whatever the case might be. You have that flexibility to take on opportunities and actually execute quickly. The other is, can I upgrade? So things are going really well. We are ready to actually grow, and I want to make sure that I can get everybody into that space or take on the long-term growth that we're expecting. Can I do that mid-lease? Do I have to wait till the end of it? Do I have to get a new site somewhere that's far away and now we have inventory and operations in different places? So understanding those opportunities is really, really important, so that you're not ending up being stuck in a specific place and not being able to achieve the goals or missing out on opportunities. So that flexibility is both, what are my terms, what are my options to get in or out of a lease, and ultimately, can I grow in the place that I'm selecting over time or downsize as needed? So that's really what we're talking about when we're thinking flexibility, because traditional commercial leases are going to be at least 3, if not 5, 10-year leases. So the new age of warehousing is, you have that flexibility to sign 12-month leases, add on for 3 months, take a upgrade after 6 months, and be able to grow as you need and at the pace of your business. So those are the real important things to look at when you're thinking about flexibility and being able to achieve those goals. So now let's think about, I am a small business or medium-sized business, and the advantages of flexibility in order to compete with large enterprise. And really that comes down to, how do I make sure that if an opportunity comes, I don't have to miss out, and that I can deliver well and I can deliver on time? And that's a key component when we're thinking about competing with large enterprise. If I'm a small vendor and all of a sudden Walmart says, hey, come into this store, let's go ahead and test this out, and I don't have enough room to actually take on that opportunity, that could be a huge setback in your business growth and your goals. if I am a construction company and a new job out of state comes up, it's very lucrative. How do I go find that space for that short term? Because I'm not going to be there for more than a year potentially. How do I make sure I have that ability to go execute on that opportunity and continue to grow that way? So when you're thinking about that flexibility, you can go and take a much smaller investment to achieve the goal that you have, or to take on that new business, to grow your business, compared to a large enterprise that can't be that nimble. You could jump on an opportunity, expand and add space, and then come back to normal if it doesn't continue. So it creates a lower risk for you as a business, but also allows you to not miss out on those revenue generating opportunities. And so I think that's one of the key things, that flexible space allows you to scale well, where you can operate. We have customers that are operating in 7, 8, 9 sites for Rise, and all of those are small footprints that allows them to be closer to their customer, take off smaller bites, so they're not betting on a huge, this is all gonna work out. They're taking those smaller bets in a flexible lease, and allows them to compete in those markets with larger incumbents that are there. And so that flexibility for a small business is both reducing risk if this doesn't work out, and being able to execute on opportunities quickly that will ultimately drive revenue growth and scale your business. So right sizing, to be honest, is a nicer way of saying downsizing. So when you're thinking about, right sizing, it's my operations have either scaled to a point or changed significantly where I don't need the amount of space I have. And that can be from a number of factors. It may not mean that growth has stalled. It may mean that we've realized that having more regional hubs and being closer to our customer is a better opportunity than having all of our operations consolidated into one location. And so when you're thinking about this, for instance, the large big box, 100,000, 200,000 square foot warehouses, a lot are sitting empty right now. And some of that is based on the economy, some of that's based on tariffs, some businesses are slowing down because of that, the uncertainty is impacting it. So how do I then say, I don't need all of this space, what is the best opportunity to operate my business at a cost that makes sense? And so being able to right size is, what options do I have to get out of that large space, but also what are my next options and what does that look like? And so I think with right sizing, the big trend that we're seeing is getting closer to that consumer and operating in the markets that you're in. It creates that opportunity to be more productive, to get more jobs done, to get faster deliveries to customers, you name it. That opportunity means I can have a smaller footprint, but actually do more. And so I think that's a huge trend that we're seeing across the board, is the ability to right size operations and ultimately get closer to the customer. Now the challenge is, what does my current lease look like? If I do need to downsize or right size, can I get out of this lease? Can I reduce the square footage that I need? And what does that cost me? And so if you're not in a flexible lease, if you're not in something that can allow you to ebb and flow with the business, then you are going to be locked in there, and that's going to be a cost that you're not utilizing that's impacting the business. So really understanding that as we look at the future, do I have that ability to be flexible based on whether or not this bet, whether or not this opportunity actually pans out? Can I get back to a certain level of square footage or space that I need without hindering my business? And so those are the key things to think about when right sizing. We're seeing a ton of corporations start to do this, where I can have a south side operation, a north side operation, and a west side operation, which is way more productive than having everybody central driving an hour here, driving an hour there, and missing out on the opportunity to execute on new business, especially if it's a service-based business or even a wholesale distribution business. So those are the key things to think about in terms of right sizing and being able to be where you need to be and drive productivity across the board.